the tank role in Overwatch 2 is not balanceable, okay? The heroes inside that role may be, yes, but the role itself is not. This video is not going to be primarily about 5v5, even though that's the reason why that's the case. Because I've made so many videos on 5v5 before anyway, but this just like tilts the shit out of me that this is the state of the game that we play, essentially. Where when I queue up into Overwatch, and I'm saying, you know, obviously on the tank role, and I have to pick one of the however many tanks it is to compete, they're all competing actively for that position that is that single tank role. Which means heroes like Wrecking Ball basically are unplayable, not because they are necessarily weak heroes, even though he is in that case, but it's also because there is no point in picking him because you only have one tank to fill that role. You no longer have a second tank. It's not like in Overwatch 1 where you could go, it's King's Row, let's play, like we want to go Ryan Zarya, but like my other tank doesn't really play Zarya, but that's okay, I can go Ryan, and they can maybe go like Ball or something, and we can do like a kind of weird brawl hybrid thing. And you can make things like that work. But in the current implementation of the game, it's not possible anymore. If you queue up as your, say you're a DPS or a support hero, you get King's Row, and your single tank player goes, sorry guys, I'm a ball one trick, you're probably going to have a pretty bad time. Not just because the hero is underbalanced, but also because there's only one tank now, and if you get a one trick, and it's not a good map for that one trick, you lose in a lot of cases. Sometimes you will win, but most of the time you're going in with a huge disadvantage. So even if you're winning, it doesn't even matter because it feels terrible because you're at a massive disadvantage anyway, okay? And this applies to all of the tanks, essentially. If you have an Orisa one trick, and then all of a sudden they go, oh my god, they only play Orisa, I'm going Zarya, then it's really, really, really difficult for that Orisa team to win. Which I don't necessarily think is problematic. I think countering is a pretty okay part of the game. I think it should be part of the game, minimally, not to the degree it is currently, but it makes sense that it would exist. My current issue, though, is that you can no longer fill any gaps, which means tanks were left behind, essentially. For example, say you like playing Reinhardt, you pick Reinhardt, and then the enemy team picks Widow. Now that's fine, you have your shield, you throw up your shield, and then you can block the Widow. Alright, that works. But then say they go Tracer. Okay, well then how do you as Ryan deal with the Tracer and the Widow? You can't peel for your team anymore for that Tracer. That's just not a possible thing that can happen anymore. And although you very rarely peeled for Tracer in the first place on Reinhardt, there's a lot of scenarios now where because you don't have that other tank, you kinda are forced to peel. But at the same time, you can't because you're the solo tank. So for the same reason that you can't peel is the same reason that sometimes you feel like you need to peel even more, which feels terrible. For example, like if you're playing Widow Tracer and you're playing Ryan, the only real play you can make as Ryan there is to go Giga aggro, pin into the backline, and do your best to try and kill the Widow and the squishies before that Tracer farms your team. And there's nothing you can do about it. The same applies to many other tank heroes, where if they are fighting, say, a Widow and a Tracer together, there is no scenario on tank where you can effectively deal with both of these things. So, you can either pick a tank that's good at dealing with Tracer, but it opens up your team to get farmed by Widow, or you go a tank that's good at killing Widow, which means your team's probably going to get farmed by the Tracer. And there's nothing you can do about it anymore, because you're a solo tank. So, no matter what you pick, no matter how you play, you're always going to be running into situations as tank where you literally can't do anything, because you're on your own in your role. You're the only one capable of doing your role in your team, and that feels terrible. Even if you're the most flexible player in the world and you're able to pick whatever your tank it may be and play them near perfectly, you're still going to run into a lot of scenarios where you just simply can't do anything because of the comp that they've picked. For example, let's say you're playing against like Rhine and then some like generic brawl comp like Reaper and like Torb, Ana, and like Lucio, right? And you're a Ram player. You can get a lot of work done as Ram. And even if the enemy team isn't playing optimally, there are still situations that the enemy team can pick to do to circumvent the fact that you're really good at brawling them. For example, if your team doesn't go brawl and they do and you want to go ram, you can't play ram anymore because you will get run over and lose, forcing you to swap because your team don't want to pick around you, which is totally fine. However, this is another situation where the solo tanking sucks, because if you want to play ram and your team doesn't want to pick around the ram comp and the enemy team do, that means you have to swap. Where before you could say pick, let's say ram in Overwatch 1, and it didn't matter what your other tank played because at least you had another tank to try and eat some of that damage, soak some of the cooldowns for you, which you can't do anymore. So even if you're picking the perfect comp against the perfect comp, you're still going to run into situations where you still can't do anything simply just by the format of the game. So, I mean, like, this is a pretty big issue, right, with 5v5, and is there a way to fix it? Because I think that even though I believe that 6v6 was a superior format, and actually I don't even believe it, I know 6v6 was a superior format for a fact. However, we are in 5v5, and we have to make 5v5 work, because I doubt they're going to change it back to 6v6. So is there a solution to actively fixing the current issues with the game where the tank role is not capable of dealing with everything at once? I don't know. I don't think I'm smart enough to know either. However, I would say if you were gonna try and fix it, it seems like one of those things where you just kind of have to make all the tanks generalists, which means you would have to rework all of the 6v6 tanks. So like things like Reinhardt wouldn't really be Reinhardt anymore. They would just be generic tank as well as everything else, because that one tank needs to be able to do everything. And if he can't, it means you're swapping constantly. And if you're swapping constantly, then you're not having a good time, generally speaking. And I don't even just speak for the high-level population here, we're in Grandmaster Top 500. I'm also speaking for the casual players. I know a lot of casual players who just want to load up in tank, they think Ram's a cool hero, they like his backstory, and they just want to play Ram. Or they like Reinhardt, they think Reinhardt's a cool hero, they want to play Reinhardt. And it sucks when they queue up, they pick Reinhardt, like, oh, look at that, they have Reinhardt too. They win the first team fight, and then they come back on a Risa Bastion, and it's like, okay, well then, like, I guess I'm playing, I don't know, like Diva, or I'm going Zarya, or something like that. Like, it sucks as a high-level player, and it sucks as a casual. Now, in Overwatch 1, we obviously had similar issues, but for the casual player base, they almost never, ever experienced it. For example, the reason double shielding goats wasn't super prevalent in the lower ranks is because the comp was just simply too complicated for the lower rank players to get a lot of value out of. However, 5v5 has managed to simplify the game so much to the point where even gold players are playing the meta comp because of how easy it is to play. And that goes for like every comp too. Like, Orisa Bastion Reaper is getting played in bronze, when before, like, playing a meta comp even below diamond / masters was considered like a rare thing. But now it's every game people are playing these meta comps. So even if you're arguing for, yeah, you're just a top 500 player, you know, like, there's so little of you, like, why do we need to balance the game around you? I think that's an ill opinion, and it doesn't make sense, and I have many videos why that's an ill opinion. However, if I were to be speaking just for the casuals at this point, it becomes even more apparent that this is horrible, not just for us, but for them as well. And I'm not really sure how Overwatch or the Blizzard team are going to fix the current issues with tank, but that's the game, I guess.